there's two camps of humans, I think, as it relates to trust.
Ooh, okay.
You've heard this before, but I think it works perfectly with where you're going, which is you are either a person who trusts first until proven to be wrong, or it's the opposite, right? You don't trust, and trust must be earned every little step of the way. Verify and confirm, basically.
Yes.
I had this conversation with my dad because we'd been talking about it at EOS. And I said, Dad, I'm just curious. It could be these two different camps of people. And I kind of already knew the answer, but I wanted him to say, I said, where are you? He's like, 100% trust first. And that's what I say. I trust first, which sometimes means you can get burned. But I think that trusting first has allowed for me to move more freely and autonomous than if it were the inverse, where trust has to be proven at every step of the way, which takes a lot of time. It's arduous. It also, I think, creates a block in human energy because every time you show up in front of someone, for instance, Ben, you have to prove it to me, prove that I should have to trust you. It automatically creates resistance and friction. So I happen to think that if these are two different paths, the first path just reduces that friction to move more freely, even though sometimes it doesn't always work out.
Is that where people can be, well, Kelly's just lucky. And do you think that that is the basis of where it's actually because you have put yourself in the position to actually receive that luck, because that trust? You think that that's the difference between someone who's lucky or unlucky, in quotes?
Maybe. I mean, I certainly think I'm really lucky, like I hit the jackpot with my parents. Not that things were perfect, okay, in my upbringing, because we all have issues, right? The crosses that we bear. But I happen to think if there was one gift my parents could have given me, it was that confidence and trust first, because it just made it easier for me to move forward in friendships, right? In those early days as kids.
Yeah.
Starts off as friendships, and then you go to school, and then you go out into the world. And so I don't have a fear. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
So when you think about abundance versus scarcity, and love versus fear, and confidence and trust versus something else, I think I have been blessed to have that kind of love, abundance, confidence, trust component early in my life, for sure. Very lucky.
What would you tell someone who maybe didn't have that upbringing, right? I was just talking with Sonny, who is a mutual friend of ours, and his story is just a story of choice, a choice of mindset, agency. And I'm curious for people who are maybe struggling with that confidence, which is really that trust, right? Whether themselves and someone else in their situation. What would you tell someone that your learnings of watching your parents, and obviously as you've become a parent and as an entrepreneur, that to kind of alchemize that to get into like this mindset?
Well, I would have two things that come up for me. You and I didn't plan this, right? There's this, this is all natural, what's unfolding here, but two things come up for me. One is you are enough. So often I think in life, we're trying to convert ourselves or make ourselves into something. We do gymnastics to make ourselves into people for whom we think we fit into a mold or fit into a path forward. And just you're good enough just as you are, is what I would say. And the second thing is to keep going, because so often there's going to be obstacles in life and people who aren't going to agree with you or believe in you. Doesn't matter. Just keep going, because what you have is good enough if you just keep going.
When you think back, as we're talking about stories and struggle, because someone might be like, that's great, Kelly, you're the president of the US. It seems that's really easy when you're on top of the mountain, or what other people perceive as a mountaintop. Like what's been one impactful struggle that you've had, whether it was in childhood, teenage, college, or like that you really struggled with, that's had the greatest impact on your ability to look at the world differently?
Oh my gosh, there's so many of them, Ben. I mean, literally I have 1,000 different disasters that have gone in my life, and, personal and professional. I think it's, I would say as a, When I was about 12, I was diagnosed with scoliosis and also had like some blood sugar issues, not too dissimilar from diabetes, but not the same. And I would say that was a moment in time when I really had to learn how to deal with the social impact of that. I had this, what they called a Boston bucket brace, and it was very painful. And it had to be worn basically 22 hours a day for 2 full years. And it just restricted movement, exercise, just kind of normal stuff for a 12-year-old. At the same time that I was battling some other health issues. Certainly, it wasn't life threatening. It was nothing like that, but it definitely created a pause, I would say, that made me just have to reflect on what does this mean for me. At the time, they had said, we're going to do this treatment for 2 years, but ultimately by the time you're 30, you'll be in a wheelchair. And you just kind of have to accept that, or there's a surgery that you can do and whatnot. But ultimately, that was sort of the diagnosis that I was given. But I didn't want to believe that that was true. And so there were just a lot of things that I needed to do. Imagine you're 12. And so 18 years later, you're expected to be in a wheelchair. It kind of changes your frame of mind a little bit. I just did everything that I possibly could that was given to me to prevent that from being true. And gratefully, I am here and I'm walking and I'm able to live my life the way that it is. But I think it's in those moments when life kind of hands you a different set of cards, and at whatever age that happens, you just have to learn how to address it. And I did have to reconcile that might be my life, but my life wouldn't be over if that ended up being the case, right? Is that the life is worth living. It just might mean that I have some restrictions or limitations. So that was, I think, a big personal thing that I had to overcome at a fairly early age. But then there have been plenty of stumbles along the way where I've almost lost businesses, almost went under. During COVID, EOS Worldwide lost 90% of its revenues or was at risk of that. And we had to turn around that ship. So there's been so many things. I can't even isolate just one, but one personal example and kind of a flavor of some others.
Wow. Have you read the book Grit?
No.
Grit, I think, is this interesting mindset of ability to alchemize. And I just think about you at 12. And not only at 12, I mean, anyone at 12, right? This is like formative years where you are starting to understand social nuances, right? And if anyone's read or watched Lord of the Flies, right? That's how sort of middle school can feel. And what a maturing instance that happened to you. That, I mean, to literally be told in 18 years you're going to be in a wheelchair, which at 12 years old, you feel like you're bulletproof. Nothing can ever happen to you. Do you feel like that gave you started some underlying framework of how to deal with hard things? And I mean, did it create an urgency in you to live fully in present? I'm really curious, because I'm thinking about if at 12 years old I was told at 18 years old. By the way, in the medical world, again, for anyone who's in the medical world, my experience with my son when he was in the NICU before he passed, it can be very overwhelming and very scary, because everything's guilty until proven innocent, and everything's on the table. So I have to imagine at 12 when they say that to you, it's not like, well, it could be. It was probably felt like very much a certainty for you. Is that how you experienced it?
Well, it was strange how it unfolded, because what comes visually in my mind, and I remember this clear as day as though it was yesterday, we were at the hospital when these different tests had been run, and they had us in a waiting room. And in walk like 20 doctors. Yeah. And I could see my mom's face, and she responded, right? Like, she's watching this can't be good, right? This is what she's thinking. And I didn't think anything of it, because I'm like, I don't know, I'm just a kid, but I'm watching, maybe this is normal, right? But she knows it's not. So I was watching my mom's face, and all these doctors come in. And then there's the lead doctor who's describing the case and the situation and all that. And the rest of them are clearly, it's a teaching hospital, and they're taking notes and all of that. But there was also the component about where they were delivering or foretelling the future, right? Here's where we are today. Here's what we found. Here's the options that are available. And here's likely the long-term outcome. And there's something in me that I think was, despite all of these doctors being in the room, like oppositionally defiant, like, no, that's not going to be me. And that lit up in me. And why I would think that in that moment, I have no idea. Why would I be thinking it? Well, somehow I know better than all these really smart doctors, but something in me just was like, no, this isn't going to be me. I don't know what is going to happen, but that's not going to be me. So that's what came up in me. Well, I had no good right to say that, but clearly there's a lot of luck and a lot of things that happened along the way. But I do think that changed my frame of mind, almost like I flipped from being maybe more passive to being more active and thinking about what my life would look like and how I might do everything I possibly could, even as this little kid, to make sure that if I could not have that future, that I wouldn't.
That's so incredible that even at 12, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, at least the leading indicator sign that you might be an entrepreneur is like when you have moments like that where that most people will be like, well, this defines me. And even before the words were out of their mouth, it's like you were already being like, this isn't going to define me. And I'm curious how that has transferred over to your role as a parent, like your own upbringing. You had, incredible examples, but you had some headwinds that I think a lot of times kids, knock on wood, don't have. And I'm curious, how has that shaped your parenting?
Yeah, I think that I have a foothold in two parts. One is I want to help my kids pursue their passion with everything in them and to find their passion, because it's never too early to be able to try things, experiment. So that's been a big motivator for me. But I have three kids, and two out of the three, they themselves have health issues with celiac disease and diabetes, and even some mental health stuff that has gone on. And so I think it's given me some empathy, because without those experiences myself, I might not have looked at it that same way. So I think it's given me both of those: is pursue your passion with all your might, find that God-given ability, unique ability, as strategic coach Dan Sullivan would say, really pursue that with all of your heart, because we have a long life ahead and you want to do exactly what you love with people you love, make a huge difference in the world with time for other passions. Something that we call the EOS life, actually. And then the other part of it is just, kindness costs nothing. And yet there's so little of it in the world. And so I really want my kids to have that kindness in how they lead themselves. And I think that they now have empathy in ways that they might not have had they not had their own health challenges. So it's interesting how it all plays itself out.
Talk a little bit about the EOS life. Number one, if you haven't read that, it's something that audience, you should read it. It's incredible. I'd be curious to share about it, and but for you to also share, what do you feel like are the top three things that are keeping entrepreneurs back from living that life?
Yeah. So the EOS life is comprised of 5 things. It's doing what you love with people you love, making a huge difference, being compensated appropriately with time for other passion. And it's a book that Gino wrote. He had sold EOS Worldwide and said, I'm not writing any more EOS books, which we were perfectly okay with. He was moving on and doing other entrepreneurial things. Yet COVID hit and he had a window of opportunity of time. And so that is when he wrote this book about the EOS life. And what keeps people from, I think, being able to achieve that is, one, it's awareness. It's written to talk about an ideal life. And while others might define it differently, it's a framework, right? There's lots of frameworks in life, but it's a way to look at living a good, holistic life. And I think it all starts with awareness. If you don't have a framework, EOS life being just one of them, you don't know what you're marching towards and what are you measuring. What's measured gets done, as we often say. And so when you're not aware of ways to measure the fulfillment of your own life, if you create your own system or use a different one, that's where, just purely by just not thinking about or thinking. And then also just measuring it, Actually, when I sit with my leadership team members every quarter, one-on-one for what we call quarterly conversations, I measure it with them. I'll say on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we at on these 5 different pieces? And so we measure it. And it's amazing how transformative that exercise is when you hold the space for other people to just stop, slow down, and think about it. So if we can do that for ourselves or for other people, that's really, I think, what moves the needle on living an ideal or EOS life.
Why do you think awareness is so hard to come by? Like, why is awareness so hard? Like, why is thinking about your thinking so hard? Right? I mean, right? I mean, it seems like when I come across entrepreneurs, it's this a lack of clarity. Like, why is that so hard?
I think there can be a lot of reasons for that. One is just slowing down. When our minds are fast and moving quickly, we just don't take the time to slow down. Sometimes we don't want to be honest with ourselves. Even if we know the things that we should be thinking about, we don't want to think about them because they're not where we want them to be. So it's hard. And sometimes it's hard to think about our thinking. That's something that strategic coach really helps serve the entrepreneur's mind by holding that space. And so I really think some of it truly is as simple as slowing down to think about our thinking, and being really vulnerable to talk about the things that are hard and to get a reality check of, okay, this is my baseline. This also doesn't define me. It's just where I'm at right now. It doesn't mean tomorrow or next week or next month it isn't different, but this is where it's at today, and to just acknowledge that. I think that's an important piece. And I don't know that we all do that, including myself. I've really had to work hard. I think the combination actually of strategic coach tools and EOS has been the perfect pairing for me to grow so much in the 9 years that I've been here as the integrator and president of EOS. I really have learned and continue to learn every day. It's never done.
When you look back at kind of if you want to say your asset sheet, I actually, when I say asset sheet, let me give some context. I look back at my life and the things that were really hard. And actually where you and I first connected was right after, my son passed. And it was actually at dinner. And that was actually where you and I had sort of talked a little bit, but then all of a sudden we just got into this conversation and I don't know, you felt like a soul that I could just share openly with. And you and I had a good talk and a good cry. But I look back at that was an asset in my life. And I'm really curious. We don't slow down until oftentimes life slows us down. And oftentimes it's these things that we don't necessarily want to have happen. Like, did I want to have what happened with Benny happen? No. But I look back at it, is it great? It gave me one of the greatest gifts is to stop and have awareness. And I'm curious, when you look back over what do you rather call them? Battle scars, assets. Do you think that has been true for you, more so than because you just carved some space out and that you just came with the awareness because you just said, oh, I'm going to take this 1 hour and I'm curious, what have you found?
Yeah, it's really in the hard moments. And your story about Benny I've thought of that a million times since you and I met, because that was a beautiful space for me. And to see how you took such a painful, raw, terrifying experience for you and your wife and your family, and you captured it in these beautiful moments, and then you did something about it. You have created a legacy in which you're helping other families who have kids in the NICU and maybe likely have the same fate, and you're creating that space for them to help and support them. That is so beautiful. So that was a moment for me that I'm sure I'm just never going to forget. So you've got a great, great impact on me with that. But the really, really hard moments, the hardest moments of my life are those that I'm the most grateful for. I'm not really just saying that. I really mean it, because they have staying power. They're not transient. You know how you might have a good moment with somebody and you're appreciative of it, but it kind of comes in and out. It moves through you rather than settling in your soul. And it's in the hardest moments of my life that it's settled right here. And it's a reminder, like a scar, that it's still there. I can still feel it and I can still draw upon it for good. Because if we can take these hard moments and we can make them for the greater good, how do we serve others or serve ourselves, serve our family? And that's all about impact. I think impact in the world comes from pain. The best impact in the world comes from that. And so while it's really, really hard at the time, whatever we're facing, whatever crisis that may be, we can't process it in that moment, but the way that we process it later and do something about it is life-changing and life-giving and energy-giving.
It's transformation.
With your situation with Benny, what have you felt and noticed about yourself since then? What's changed about you? How do you maybe live your life or lead differently today?
It's a great question. I think the transformation with me has been looking at the filters that I make decisions through. And before the end with Benny, I remember the doctor saying, "Well, what do you want to do?" Again, for audience who maybe hasn't listened to any of the other podcasts, but my son, we didn't know he had trisomy 18, and until after he was born, even though he went through genetic tests and said, "Nope, clean bill of health." We knew that in terms he had some heart issues. And we were prepared for that. And about a week after he was born, we found out he had trisomy 18 and that he just started going downhill and you could see it. And, but at the time when we were meeting with the doctor, he had said, "What do you want to do? We can keep him alive." And I remember, just like you at 12 years old, having this like moment where like they're telling you this, but like you go to a different spot. And I remember thinking, what an interesting word to use, like alive. And I started thinking, like mulling over, okay, well, what does that mean? How do I define that? And I came down to this filter of, is alive really living? And I started thinking about this in my own context of like God, universe, whatever, be like, are you alive or are you living? And that has really transformed my life because the filter I look at, the decisions that I'm doing, where I'm at, the kindness, the trying, the presence and awareness that I bring to life is really, my life has really broken down into so many of these before this and now after this. You know, it was before Jenna, after Jenna. Jenna is, for everyone who's listening, is my incredible life partner, business partner, and best friend. Then there's strategic coach, life before strategic coach, life after strategic coach. Then and really at the truly the one that has really made the most life transformation is this before Benny and after Benny. And it's created and I say an urgency. I think it's created an urgency to not just be alive, but to live. And it's the thing that I try to encourage everyone, like my teams, that, you know, when I'm coaching for strategic coach, you know, I'm coaching with my Max Life, entrepreneurial clients. And it's actually the impetus, actually what this very podcast about having conversations about people, not just being alive, but how they actually are living, right? And how they have lived.
It's amazing. Do you remember, it was maybe October of last year, we were both in Chicago for strategic coach, and it was just a beautiful day, and we were breaking for lunch, and some of us went outside.
Yes.
And you held this space. It was very peaceful. Again, it was a beautiful day. The fall leaves, the wind is lightly blowing, the sun is out. It's this beautiful experience. But you sat there in such a peaceful way, and we're just talking to everybody, asking, just being curious is really how I remember it. But it was a very calm, peaceful way that, I don't know if you want to call it, you facilitated it, but it was a really neat space that we had. And I remember when we were done, everyone was so appreciative of that time that we had together. And I wonder, have you always been like that? Or is that a post-Benny transformation in you?
I do remember it was beautiful. And anyone who's been in Chicago in the late fall, when you get these just beautiful warm days. There was one of those days that slight wind, warm out, but not so warm that you're sweating. I remember at a really early age, Kelly, that I remember going, I think I knew I wanted to be great. And I just never, at first it was like, oh, I want to be a basketball player. I'm 5'10" and a half. I can barely get off the ground, so that knew that was going to work. And I kept looking for all of these things to do versus to be. And I remember in 7th grade thinking, I was like, you know what? I'm really great at loving people. Like I really love to love. But I think that you go, well, how do you do that? Like how do you turn that into something? And I think that a lot of that love, how it manifests as curiosity, and curiosity in people to see their sunrise on their truth come up. And so often, if you've ever seen a sunrise, is that long before the sun comes up, you start to see the colors. And I feel like so many people, they see the colors and it's beautiful, but their potential and the reality that I can see so clearly doesn't really ever get to break above the horizon. And I would say that Benny really helped me break through and see my horizon, and see like break through my horizon and see my sunrise. I will say that my urgency and my curiosity has been lit by that, and that if I want to live and not just be alive, I want to be able to share that generosity. I want to share Benny, because every time I get to hear it and see it, I feel him. I feel him in my heart. I feel him in my presence of that. I look at, he lived 16 days. And at the time he lived more than my 42 years in 16 days. I mean, that's a book somewhere in there. But I mean, he truly lived more in 16 days than I had in my 42 years. And then that he was named after me, which I was reticent of. And then Gino said, it's a really good name, which I really couldn't argue with. I was like, yeah, it is a really good name. And I was concerned because I was afraid that that he would feel compelled to try to live up to me. Right? I've seen it in the past that people are named. They feel like there's a shadow. And when he passed, I realized that he had flipped the script. He, in 16 days, cast such a big shadow. And not, when I say shadow, like an incredible shadow, an inspiring shadow. And so I think that that's where a lot of that has come from, was this idea of, are you alive or are you living?
Mm, that's so great. I definitely see a book in your future for this. He is of you and for you. And so what a story that is to tell, because we all want to relate to experiences we have in our life, but you have a very unique one to share. And it is in these, again, 16 days, right? Just barely over 2 weeks. And yet it was life transforming for you and for many, many others. And I also love the story about the butterflies, but I don't have time for that today. But that is a great story. There's just so many stories that come from and of Benny that are for you, that I look forward to seeing captured one day, because I know you'll do it.
Yeah. Lee Brower, who is a friend, and he's also an associate coach for Strategic Coach. I just saw him in Toronto, and he said this really incredible statement. He said, God doesn't waste experiences. And it's so true. And you see it echo in this incredible way. And the story you're talking about, of that, maybe these are coincidences, but I don't really believe that there are coincidences. But at Benny's celebration of life, we were supposed to get these butterflies. And for anyone who has knows this, or had known someone who's lost a baby, butterfly represents a lost baby. And so we had these butterflies that were shipped in, and they're supposed to be here. And again, just like many things, it got stuck in transit, and they're supposed to be overnighted, and it looked like they weren't going to get here, and which was disappointing because we wanted the moment to be just this moment to just be just right. And anyways, we were in the middle of towards the end of the ceremony, and Benny was born on December 12th, which was Frank Sinatra's birthday. And after the 16 days, we realized that like he did it his way. And so anyways, we were playing the song My Way, and no joke, we got done, and I said, "Hey, unfortunately, those butterflies aren't going to come here." And literally someone in the crowd goes, "There's a butterfly." And we hadn't seen butterflies. We built this beautiful little garden for him, and no joke, there was like 10 butterflies that flew through. Like, I mean, it was epic. And then fast forward, Kelly, to we bought a place down in Amelia Island because that's where we baby mooned with him. We felt this strong connection. We ended up buying a place on the beach where we spent a lot of time walking after Benny passed away. Literally the next morning flew down to Amelia Island just for us to be able to, Jenna and I, to be able to connect. And so we bought it and we closed on it, and we went to the end of the boardwalk to stand by the beach. And there's this big dune, right? A natural barrier of protection. And as we're standing there, 20 butterflies flew right over our head.
No kidding. I mean, it's heaven sent. But both of those stories are just heaven sent, and so beautiful, so beautiful.
Thank you, and thank you for asking about it. It's been incredible, but I think the thing that we try as humans is try to avoid struggle and avoid painful moments. But what Benny showed me was that Newton's law is real, is that you don't get high highs without experiencing the low lows. Like you don't have joy without experiencing the sorrow.
That's right. And we're not guaranteed a life of comfort. That's just not how it works. And yet humans, more than anything, seek comfort. But it's not where the growth is. It's not just not realistic to live there. But if we can embrace the moments as they come, because some things are controllable in life and other things are not. But you couldn't control what happened to Benny, but yet you embraced it and you loved through it, and you got to the other side, and you honor him every day that you show up. You honor him on this podcast. You honor him when you're with your clients. You honor him in a workshop. And that part is so beautiful.
I've come to realize that struggle is actually the act of us excavating. I think we all, like, the perfect version of you, Kelly, already exists. The perfect version of me, the people who are listening to this, the perfect version already exists, but it's actually in the struggle is the excavation of the sediment that is actually providing dissonance or haze or blocking this greater sense of awareness. And I think greater sense of awareness is really just greater clarity, right? I mean, when you think about you, Kelly, you've probably made the biggest leaps in those struggles. Like when you were just said, I almost lost everything, almost went bankrupt. Like what awareness came from there for you?
To get up and keep going, right? Just get up and keep going, and to just recognize again that brutal reality. And, it's to the degree that you're willing to sit in the discomfort and the pain and the hurt and the really hard stuff, to sit there in it. Don't run from it, but to sit in it. I mean, I've literally had to hold myself in those spaces where the first thing I want to do is flee and run. But it's to sit in it and to really process it and work through it. But it's a very, very hard thing to do. It's so not human. And yet, I've only known you since post Benny, But I can just share with you, you were so authentic and genuine and real. And again, whether that was pre or post, it doesn't matter. Is whatever has created that in you. It's just a beautiful and a very rare skill to be able to do that. Um, yeah, it's been just such a pleasure to know you and to be your friend, and it's so fun to spend time with you. Whenever I get it, I look forward to it.
Well, thank you, and likewise. I think that we're all looking for truth, and I after Benny, I just became the guy. Like if after like I didn't run from the grief, and I remember distinctly having this vivid image that um when I was processing that I was walking this ridge line from like peak to peak. And imagine like this beautiful like image from like Colorado, and there's this like ridge top. And on one side was this deep abyss that I could just see myself getting lost in, like the grief and the sorrow. And maybe in terms of maybe in the depth of that, feeling bad for myself. And then on the other valley, like on the other side of the ridge line, was this getting lost in the busyness of life to try to like numb. My guess was my guess and bet was that if I went down that rabbit hole, that I'd like to numb. And I just started to realize that like I was the guy like in Starbucks. Like if I was feeling it, there'd be sometimes something that just would trigger it. And I would be the guy that they'd be like, what is going on? Like crying. And by the way, that also led me to believe that when I see someone in public really struggling, whether they're super angry, they're sad, is that there is a storyline that's going on that you have no idea. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that when I would fly home from LA, and usually after coaching, and flying back to the Midwest from the West Coast is a bear. But so inevitably you have to get home at a reasonable time on Saturday, you have to leave really early in the morning. And the beautiful thing about leaving early in the morning is that you break through the clouds because there's always a good marine layer in LA, and you get to see the sunrise. And for whatever reason, for about 9 months, that would just move me to tears. I mean, it was about Benny, it was about possibilities, it was about the beauty of like the unknown, but also then the sorrow of the fact that like Benny is not going to have that storyline. And I think that's probably what I grieve the most, is that um what would his story been? And I think that's actually a part when you're talking about that October, is what's everyone's story? I'm so intrigued with everyone's story. And I have to imagine like my biggest fear and why we created 16 days as a charity was that Benny's story would die. And I'm so attuned that like my story, your story, that people's story is never going to be told. And I think that at the the root of almost everything is that people desire, I mean, truly at the root of everything. And why I think like ego rears its ugly head is because people want to be seen, heard, and understood. And when that happens, is they feel loved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a great to be able to hold that space for someone. And it can be very small slivers of time too, where you're with someone and you're showing that value, appreciation, love, and care. Um, but that can stick with that person while it was a short moment in time as a person might measure time, but it can really stick with someone and for a very, very long time. Kind of like my mom, like that one little moment in time that she had met that person I worked with. And 20 years later, how powerful is that? And so our stories are kind of lived out through other people who come after us too.
Amen. Who are the people that have shaped, like who've given you moments? Like we were just talking about, like you and I had, like, I'll never forget where we were at that dinner, where we were sitting when when we had that, like that moment of just talking about that and sharing that moment. When you think about your own journey, what are the ones that stick out to you that were moments, whether teachers, like, and what are some examples that you could share or be willing to share?
Well, again, certainly my parents, but this is an odd one. that stands out to me. It's so you would not think that I would choose this, but it was a moment where I was running a company and I had to let someone go. And, I take no pleasure in those conversations. No one ever does. But I had sat with him one-on-one in a conference room, and I could see that he was choked up. We didn't even fully have the conversation, but he sort of like knew it was coming. And I remember thinking, I'm just going to pause right here. And I said to him, can I go get you a glass of water? And he said, that would be really great. So I just went out. I gave it 5 minutes, grabbed water, came back and sat down. And we just had a conversation. Now, this is a hard thing. I'm letting this man go. It's impacting his wife, his family. It's, this is not good, right? But yet we had this beautiful exchange, this most, difficult set of messaging where it wasn't, he was able to walk away feeling valued, appreciated, and just utterly human without walking away feeling bad. And for some reason, and he said to me, I just want to thank you because how I feel being with you, even though you're saying something I don't want to hear, I actually am walking away feeling loved because you care about me enough to let me go. And for some reason, that has stuck with me for years. And it ties to something, and I have lots of moments with Gino Wickman. He's taught me so many things, so much gold. I mean, just one of the greatest mentors in my entire life. And there was a moment I had walked into his session room. He was doing a coaching or navigation meeting is what we called it. It was once a month, every month, half day in Gino's office. Okay. And he's coaching. And I was just frustrated about something. I don't even remember what the issue was at that time. And in his infinite wisdom, he leans back in his chair and he says, Kelly, you owe people clarity, not what they want to hear. And it has stuck with me because while this story that I tell about the man who I was letting go, preceded this conversation with Gino, it's in these small moments that you learn like life's wisdom, that in giving people clarity, that is a gift and that is being kind. Clear is kind. We know that. That's not new, but it's in those moments where it settles into your bones and you realize that there's going to be a lot of difficult things that happen over the years for yourself, for your family, for your business partners, whatever it might be. But if you can just in all of those moments, remember the greater good and remember that that person is human too. And just to see that through with kindness, love, and genuine care and concern. So that would be a couple examples where Gino loved me enough to just basically tell me, Kelly, like, come on now, right? And to be honest with me, and then for me to be able to pass that on to others. And I still use that today. Sometimes you're having a difficult conversation, but done the right way, people can walk away feeling loved even in the most difficult times.
Have you ever been almost fired, Kelly?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. But I'm sure. It hasn't happened largely because, I'm normally the one running the business these days, but sure, I'm sure it has been because, I can have all of these other traits in me that, I could be obstinate and, opinionated and believe that things should be a certain way. And I'm sure that has ticked off more than one person in a row, but, so for sure. The answer is no, I haven't, but I'm prepared to be any day, right?
I call these kind honesty moments. And I remember one in my OG business where I actually worked for a broker dealer as a representative for them. And when I had gotten hired, I was already planning all of the log house I was going to build. And I spent more time thinking about the outcome than actually the doing. And I just distinctly remember that December, because I had gotten hired in like August, and that December, 4 months later, the conversation, it was at like Tuesday at like 8:30 p.m. And a couple things were going on simultaneously. Number one, I didn't have a whole lot of money in the bank. When I say a whole lot of money, like I was scrambling to think about like, well, how was I going to pay rent? We had Christmas coming up, and we didn't have money to buy gifts, so we had to like make gifts. And then on top of that, it had this call, and And it was so interesting when we think about like leadership and what does it mean to be a leader, and having like the intuition to know these moments. At the time, the regional manager was calling me to actually like let me go, and he just had this. I don't know. I can't exactly remember the conversation, but I remember afterwards, him going, "It didn't feel right to do that," and but having that kind, honest conversation, and the kind, honest conversation was, "You're not doing your job." Like, flat out, you're just if you're telling the truth, you're just not doing your job. And that sparked everything I have today. And the reason why I call it kind and honest is that kind honesty can lead to like you're just it's not a right fit for you, and it's hurting you, it's hurting the company, because you're not winning. And in this case, but also kind honesty can be these moments that just that impact you and put you on the trajectory. And it created a level of urgency for me to, well, to never be in that position again.
Have you read the book Knowing Honesty by Ken Bogard and Grace Gavin? It's a great book. Ken Bogard is a dear friend of mine who I just love so much. And he took this topic of two things that are typically put together, open and honest, right? Like they're often used together, open and honest, broke them down, and he separated into what open is and what honest is. It's two uniquely different things. He has a book, as I mentioned, but it's also an assessment of how open and honest are you personally and in business or professional life. And I remember taking the assessment the first time, and I'm like, oh boy, I don't know how this is going to come out. It was something like 82% in both. Actually, it was interesting that the scores were the same, but it's a brilliant book because it really breaks down how do you truly engage in the most open, being able to listen and to receive without reservation before responding with your own agenda or thoughts or ideas. And then the honest is truly, truly being at the root, honest and candid in a loving way. And there's this in the book, it writes about an agreement that you can have with people that like you basically both say, and I wish I had it in front of me right now so I could recite it for you, but check it out online, knowinghonesty.com, and check out the book. But it really comes up with an agreement how in life we can break open what is really hard for people to be both open and honest. And you come up with an agreement that you owe each other. And I just love that book. So it might be something you're interested in.
How do you define open and honest? I mean, based off of like, obviously you can read a book and you're an entrepreneur. So you obviously take it and then amalgamate it into kind of your own life experience. How do you define open and honest?
I think open for me means being receptive without reservation or limitation, that I'm holding the space for that other person to be able to communicate themselves. And I'm not being defensive. I'm not resisting. I'm not challenging. I'm just really seeking to be curious, as we've talked about today, and to take it in without a thought that I'm right or that person's wrong if it is a difference of opinion, because sometimes that can arise. But that to me is what open is. It's just being really able to sit in it genuinely for the benefit of the other person and not coming from an egocentric or self-serving point of view.
And honest, how do you define that?
Yeah, I mean, that's just that, sometimes brutal candor is just, it's more important to be completely as what is honesty, right? It's only that one person's perspective too. So there's a little bit of, I think, judgment there, but I would say just giving it as best you can, your perspective, and sharing how you see the world.
One of the things I've always appreciated about you, Kelly, is your willingness to increase your capability of knowledge and not only have the knowledge, but transform that into wisdom, right? Again, our friend Lee Brower says, I hope I'm quoting him correctly, that knowledge is a pond and wisdom is a river. And and how I see that, like with you, is that every time we have a conversation, you're like, this reminds me of a book XYZ. Can you share, if you were to, and I'm putting you on the spot here, what are the top 3 to 5 books that have been transformative to you that if you said, our audience, if you read these, this will change your game?
Well, I would say traction from a business perspective. I really would.
Well, it is. It is. If you're an entrepreneur and you haven't read it, or that you're missing out. That and Rocket Fuel.
Yeah, those I think are just fundamental, some of the best business books out there, genuinely. Beyond that, personally would be the Bible for me. But beyond the Bible, there's a book that I read in August, and it's The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it is about, it kind of ties to the Bible. It's about, Jesus's journey and how he was never hurrying anywhere, but incredibly impactful and powerful in all that he did. And it draws the comparison to us in our modern world that, with all the hurry and the speed and the AI, this and nothing wrong with AI. I love AI too, and I use it every day. Okay, I'm a ChatGPT user on a daily basis, but that it is, in the gift of that slowing down theme and not hurrying, that you're really gaining the most wisdom and the care and the conversations and all of that. And it was just a book that, I get a lot of books and I love to read. I'm a very avid reader. But anyway, so this book is given to me. It was sent to me, happened to be on my desk. I was packing for Italy and I was like, okay, I'm just going to throw this in the bag. Got to go, right? I'm hurrying as I'm packing the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. There's an irony to this. But anyway, packing, getting ready to go. We go to Italy. And at the very last leg of this almost 2-week vacation, we're at this beautiful farm with rolling hills and a vineyard and the whole thing. But I'm sitting by a pool reading this book. And I had this aha moment as I'm sitting there thinking, I am so the opposite of this, not in this given moment there, but back home. I am so not living this genuinely. I am rushing here and rushing there. And I really disdain the word busy, by the way. It really, I think, is a word that should be eradicated from our language. But anyway, I thought this is an aha moment for me that everything needs to change. And so I came back. I actually texted the book to Mark O'Donnell, my business partner, and I said, we need to do this. Okay. We need to go back to the basics. We need to simplify a lot of things in our own business and our lives. And so when I got back, that's what we did. And so that would be another book that I would say, if you're really looking to kind of get a grounding in life and fundamentally go back to the basics, that would be another really great book.
All of my big leaps have come down by slowing down. We've slowed down to speed up. And it's really interesting that you read that book in the country of the Dolce Vita, right? In terms of the sweet life, which is not rushing through life. And that's really interesting.
And then I got one more book for you.
All right.
And that's The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. So a very old book, but that one is just really riddled with all kinds of ways to just think positively. And I do think fundamentally, as kind of where we had originally started in our conversation, is so important that no matter what's happening is to have that layer of positivity in your mindset. What
are your takeaways though? Like, what are the one or two like hard hitting things from that book that just landed for you?
Yeah, it's, to trust your own instincts and not to rely on the outside world to define what your life should look like. That the positivity needs to be born from your own soul, your own experience. I think that really, and my dad had, going back to my dad, he had given me Wayne Dyer tapes. Okay, this is dating me. And The Power of Positive Thinking and some Dale Carnegie books. Okay, he hands this to me as a 16-year-old. Yeah, it's in a shoebox. Still remember all that. So it was the combination of actually all of those, the Wayne Dyer, the Dale Carnegie, and the Norman Vincent Peale, that could together really kind of gave me this it's really the confidence. Yeah, but the confidence comes from having a positive outlook and mindset.
We're talking about stories. We started with stories. I'm thinking that as we close out, I want to end with a story that probably hasn't been written yet. Kelly, if we're sitting here 5 years from today, what is the conversation we're having? And I want to be clear, what is it that the conversation you want us to be having about where life's taking you?
Yeah, in 5 years, and I think a lot about this because we just did our business and future lens planning through our what we call a vision traction organizer. But in 5 years, what I would like to be able to say is that we have reached 1 million companies running on EOS, but it's beyond that. One of the unexpected greats of EOS is that it helps you to run a great business and get what you want out of your business. But the real truth is that the legs are far wider than that, probably by a 10x factor, which is that it just changes people's lives for the better. So I would love, and I mean, it teaches you how to communicate, how to connect, how to resolve issues permanently at the root and solve them forever. There's just so many things that are the undercurrent that you wouldn't find it on our website, but that's the real reality of what EOS and the impact it can have in the world. And in 5 years, I would love to be able to say 1 million companies are technically running on it, but that it's impacted 10 million people because of the reach of families and teams that go beyond just the entrepreneur.
I love that. I love that. How about you personally?
So in 5 years, well, I hope that EOS is still thriving and I'm here, but I also have this burning desire to write a couple books. One is the art of being an integrator, because the science is rocket fuel. So I want to write the book about the art where it bridges the art and the science together, because that is where, integrators are the counterpart or the missing puzzle piece to a great visionary and a business.
Amen.
And through that partnership that entrepreneurial companies are transformed. So I want to write that book because it's never been written. And I want to do some coaching. I love coaching. It's near and dear to my heart. I came from education in the financial services industry too, as I built and sold my own business there. But I'd like to explore that with visionaries and integrators, actually.
Wow. Breaking news, coming to a bookstore near you and a opportunity to be coached by one of the best, Kelly. Kelly, if people want to follow more of you or about you, like where can they reach out? Like websites, links, books that you've already written.
Sure. So you'll find me on LinkedIn, Kelly P. Knight. You'll see me there. Just look it up. And then website is eosworldwide.com. And then the book that Mark O'Donnell, CJ Dubé was the first female EOS implementer, and myself wrote, just came out in April, is People Dare to Build an Intentional Culture. And humbly, I think it's a great book about culture and building great companies, and that all starts with people.
Amen to that. We'll have to do another podcast just on the culture piece, because we could have a whole 2-hour session on that.
I really think you and I could sit for days and have great conversations. So today is just one little microcosm of that.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Kelly, you have been an absolute blast, and having you on here has just been so enlightening. And I hope that the audience really gets to understand and sees in this little snippet about how truly a special person you are, and that they see that EOS is not just an operating system to help them get more business success, but that it's being run by a person who has just an incredible heart. So thank you for being on here.
You, Ben. This has been so much fun. Thank you for inviting me onto this. It's just been such a joy-filled pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. As I like to do, what's the last word? What's the last word? What do you want our audience to leave with?
Just love. Love.
I love that. Thank you for being on here, and love to have you back.
I would love to be back, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.